Hello everyone and welcome to our newest episode, which is going to be covering the recent elections in Hungary and Serbia. Both of these elections were pivotal, so let's start with Serbia. In order to discuss Serbia, we have to go back to 1997, when the Serbians had their first relatively free election. This was contested by two main political parties, the ultra-nationalist Serbian Radical Party and the Left Coalition, which was also ultra-national. Clearly, there was not much difference in foreign policy. More of rather a monarchist system would be adopted or that of a socialist neo-Soviet system. This continued on until 2008, when the first democratic opposition ever won, the For European Serbia, which was a big tent pro-EU electoral alliance. This electoral alliance was able to make it into government by winning throughout the country, especially in the north, near Belgrade, which is around here, which is their base. However, they were quickly upset by the SNS coalition in the 2012 elections. The SNS is currently the ruling party of Serbia, and this was their big breakthrough. They successfully won the election, and with their coalition partners, who were formerly of the Left Coalition all the way back in the 1990s, they achieved government, kicking out the pro-Western alliance of parties and also instituting many anti-democratic reforms. These greatly reduced the chance that Serbia would join the EU in the near future, which was followed in 2017 by undeniably unfair elections. As you can see here, only one candidate actually had a party, with the other three candidates being independents. And the one candidate of the main party had 55% of the vote. But this is not to say that the election was unfree, because, as you can see here, numerous opinion polls from reputable sources such as Ipsos all had the leader winning with over 50% of the vote. But the issue is not one of freeness, but one of fairness. This is because, as the European Commission stated in its Serbia 2018 report, that the regulatory body for electronic media failed to address imbalances in media coverage. It also says that the candidate of the governing coalition, Aleksandar Vučić, had 10 times more airtime on national broadcasters than all other candidates combined. This is followed in 2020 by new elections, and as you can see, there was only 3 major parties that made it into government, and one that controlled a significant supermajority, the SNS coalition. All pro-democracy parties have been kicked out by this time, with the far left achieving a mere 32 seats and the far right achieving a mere 11 seats. The only democratic opposition nearly collapsed, as you can see here, winning just a mere 2.24% or 0.95%. Therefore, the opposition had originally decided to boycott the 2022 general election. This election, which is the one we are talking about today, was won by the same SNS party, but there were numerous reforms that had to be made for the opposition to even agree to hold this election. It was a time met by polarization, and although some organizations noted that the ruling party dominated the media, news channels did organize debates and political program presentations during this time. The main opposition candidate, Nedarko Ponjos of the Narodna People's Party in Serbia, was only able to achieve less than 20% of the vote. However, he still provided a stable opposition, and the new party that was pro-EU was the United Serbia coalition, which made it into government with 38 seats, while the ruling coalition lost 68 seats. However, while the success for the opposition might be on the surface, it is really none of a success at all. This is because, once again, the far-left coalition achieved the third most seats in this parliament, and is going to be able to form a supermajority coalition with the SNS. This means that there will likely continue to be a pro-Putin, pro-Russia stance in foreign policy, even though outwardly the SNS coalition proclaims to be working towards the EU. Which moves us next to Hungary. In 2010, the Fidesz-KDNP alliance, which is a right-wing political alliance led by Viktor Orban, absolutely trounced the, at the time, ruling Socialist Party. The Socialist Party also only barely finished ahead of even further right than Fidesz Jobbik, while the relatively moderate LMP had just formed. The rapid rise of the far right and the collapse of the center-left was a huge change in the Hungarian political system. While the socialists collapsed, the right continued to rise, and this continued in 2018, when the far-right Jobbik, now billing themselves as a moderate center-right alternative for former Fidesz voters, achieved second place, while the combined left-wing parties only achieved around 50 seats. These left-wing parties were nowhere near as strong as Fidesz. While Fidesz was able to win nearly 50% of the vote just on its own, the next closest runner-up only won 23%. And while many experts had suggested that the opposition should combine, Jobbik had decided that they would do better on their own. Unfortunately for them, this did not happen, with Fidesz winning across Hungary and even in what were former leftist strongholds in Budapest, which led to this, the 2022 elections in Hungary. As you can see, there are only 3 parties represented in parliament after this election. The Fidesz-KDNP bloc, which has now moved even further to the right, the United for Hungary bloc, and the Our Homeland bloc. Our Homeland is made up of former Jobbik MPs who left the party. But why would they leave the party? Well, Jobbik technically didn't make it into parliament, but in reality, it absolutely did. This is because of the United for Hungary alliance, which is composed of many parties, including the Democratic Coalition, the original Socialist Party, and also Jobbik themselves. This coalition is made up of many different parties, ranging from the leftist socialists to the far-right Jobbik. This, of course, led to a lot of consternation, as an alliance that was perceived to be a center-left alliance nominated outspoken conservative and independent Mayor Peter Markizé to run as their standard-bearer. Therefore, while Peter Markizé, after the election, stated that around 2/3 of previous Jobbik voters either voted for the Our Homeland movement or Fidesz-KDNP, most of the center-left alliance did consolidate around him, leading to victories throughout Budapest. But this was obviously not enough, as Budapest does not provide nearly as many seats as the rest of the country, leading to yet another Fidesz-KDNP landslide. Additionally, many other news sources said that Peter Markizé was the United Democratic Hungarian opposition's last best hope to defeat Viktor Orban, who in the aftermath of this election proclaimed, among others, enemies such as the free press, Hungarian leftists, and most ominously, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. Thus, Putin, despite being on the back foot throughout much of the international stage, has had 2 of his major allies, Viktor Orban and Alexander Vučić, win their elections in their respective countries. Additionally, the Hungarian victory by Viktor Orban has caused a large break in Hungarian-Polish relations. This is because Poland is among the most hawkish of all of the countries in the EU when it comes to Russia, proclaiming that they are no longer going to be importing Russian gas and calling for more support for Ukraine. This is as opposed to the Hungarians, who used to be the major ally in the EU of Poland. Hungary and Poland used to veto proposed sanctions and measures against the other, as they were both governed by seemingly right-wing zealots who would campaign against immigration and among diversity. However, the break in Hungarian-Polish relations offers an intriguing prospect to the EU, where through possible gestures towards Poland of help and other things, they would be able to almost defeat Viktor Orban inside of his own country. This has led to Viktor Orban calling, among other enemies as well as Zelensky, the EU, which is very important considering that most Hungarians still want to stay a part of the EU, despite voting for an openly anti-EU party in Fidesz. Clearly, the pro-Russian parties of Europe are not yet dead, despite a temporary lapse in prospects. Thank you for watching, and please comment what you think should happen down below. See you next time.